that would be helpful. So, and then kind of I'll manage it as new people come in and all the business. So then at the end, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask at the end. All right, so today's topic is all about mental health. As you may or may not be aware, but May is mental health awareness. So we are, kind of doing a deep dive more into mental health. Mental health does correlate with emotional health, and we will talk about how that impacts your actions, behaviors, lifestyle, all the things, right? So starting with my little introduction. So I'm a holistic doctor in family practice. What does all that mean? I am going to mute everyone just to kind of keep the noise down. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat box and then we'll kind of get to it at the end. I have an AS in psychology. I have a BS in natural healthcare sciences. So one of the reasons why I didn't go in full into psych was because it was really about the study of what's wrong with the human psyche and the human mind. And I kind of had already experienced a lot of what was wrong with the human psyche. My mother has multiple personalities, or now it's referred to as DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. So I already, deep narcissism and lots and lots and lots of different traumas and dramas and all the things. Very non-self-regulating, which we'll talk about. And then, my dad on the other end was the whole opposite. He was very emotionally shut down. They were both Marines. And so I really didn't necessarily need to learn any more about psychology in terms of what was wrong with the human psyche. Now, later on, I did train in Carl Jung and Carl Jungian's work and psychoanalytic theory, applied psychoanalytic theory, and how to put kind of people into certain containers. And really how to teach them more behavioral. Natural healthcare sciences is more about the sciences behind natural healthcare. So like your biochemistry, things like that, biology. Alternative medicine is all the modalities. Natural medicine is an extension. I focus mainly on homeopathy with that, which in homeopathy, it's low frequency medicine that we use to treat the emotional body first, and then physical symptoms, because there's a connection between the mental, emotional, as well as the physical of the person. I'm a naturopathic doctor. And so naturopathy, I focus mainly on laboratory diagnostics and functional medicine. So all the laboratory interpretation of biochemistry. And so why someone clinically or chemically is off balance, and then being able to treat that on a physiological level, not just behavioral. And then public health really helped me to understand cultural implications and how, that those impact, especially in different socioeconomic, as well as different cultures, religious sects, et cetera. This year, I start my PhD in applied psychophysiology, and that's more into, which I've already started, that's more into the biofeedback, neurofeedback space. I've already started doing a lot of work in that space in now already. So we'll talk about that. But I have lots of different certifications in neurolinguistic programming, in clinical hypnotherapy, in Kundalini, and in several different, mental, emotional, spiritual. I can't even think of them off the top of my head, but lots of different things. Plus, I've treated a ton of patients. So if everybody, let's see, I think we got most of that. All right, perfect. I'm going to just mute everybody again. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or hold on. So let's kind of talk about the stigma. Let's jump in. Let's talk about the stigma of mental health, right? So mental health, people assume, right, that mental health is only like a pathology, right? And it's not. Mental health is something that has to be managed, right? Meaning that some days we're up, some days we're down, some days we feel great, some days we're like, holy shit, what's going to happen? I just want you all to be aware. I probably will use profanity in this. If it offends you, I apologize. You're welcome to get off now if you'd like. But just to kind of keep it real, mental health is about, recognizing, honoring, and dealing with your emotions, right? And our culture doesn't necessarily lend itself to actually being fully present with your emotions, especially because it's so action driven, it's so career driven, it's so focused on, survival and wealth and, all the things, right? And so we don't have a society that honors emotion. So i.e. COVID happened, everybody's locked inside, they can't go and do and distract themselves. And now all of a sudden, all these emotional things that they didn't deal with for years and years and years kind of come up and start biting them in the ass. And so we really want to spend more time and focus and energy on cultivating what mental health actually is and removing some of the stigma around it. And we're going to talk about mental health from the perspective of consciousness and being mindful. That doesn't mean that we pretend that things don't exist and we're in denial. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We're actually being present to what we're thinking and what we're feeling, and we're learning how to accept and process through those things. So excellent book, Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. It's a book pretty early on in my career. It was recommended to me by another massage therapist. I started off as a massage therapist and kept going back to school. And it was really powerful because it helped me to learn the process of reframing, which we'll kind of talk a little bit about. So mental health is also about setting boundaries for people, places, and things that do not honor you and honor who you are. Mental health can also be attached to your core values, your core belief systems. And if, the people in your life are congruent or not congruent with your core beliefs, I'll tell you kind of some stories about that. And then mental health is also about how you manage your stress, your brain function, your self-care, your self-worth, your self-esteem, and then all the things that you tolerate or don't tolerate as a result of that. So again, this is not about labels, right? So I have heard them all in terms of oh, I'm ADD, I'm ADHD, I'm bipolar, this person is narcissistic, this person is a sociopath. I'm less involved right now in the labels. Now, there are specific pathologies and they have specific indications to them. I think a lot of times in our cultural society, we tend to dismiss certain behaviors and we kind of throw a label on it and say, oh, okay, well, this person is just this. And so we kind of give a pass. And so while I respect and honor and believe that certain labels do exist, I don't believe that labels really define who we are, as a person. The other thing to know is that mental health is just not for some people. Like there's not like, I know, especially in like male, female, a lot of times, mental health is often seen as a female thing. Oh, you've got to really work on your emotions as a woman. And, you're a little bit much because you're a woman, and mental health is male and female, both combined. If you have a mind, you need to manage your health around it, especially because our nervous system is being bombarded constantly with all kinds of different information, and it's being almost assaulted on a daily basis with the onslaught of information. And so we all have to really manage our mental health. It's also not about taking medications or supplements to fix it. I'm not opposed to people taking medications or taking supplements. I know, part of my personal background is having been a child of two Marines and my mother having a psychotic break at 8, I was very badly abused, traumatized sexually, mentally, emotionally, as well as physically. My mother had 18 recognized personalities. They've been charted and tracked and all of that. And one of her personalities was homicidal, and it was a male. And this particular entity did not like like me at all. And so was extremely violent. And I experienced, choking and, being kicked in the head and all kinds of traumatic experience, to the point that I developed post-traumatic stress at 14. Because that particular entity was homicidal, my mother, being a Marine, had shotguns in her house and would threaten us to shoot us. So I really didn't really sleep until my early 30s. And how I know that is because I went through lots and lots and lots of challenges, and then, one day found neurofeedback, and then, after like 3 sessions of this, I actually lay down, went to sleep, and like I woke up like, what just happened? Like, that's what sleep is? That's what people do when they sleep. And so, and that came from a hypervigilance in my brain, which we can talk about a little bit later. So, this is not just a like, oh, I went and learned this in school sort of thing. Yes, I did learn about it because I was very motivated about it. My grandmother also was schizophrenic. So, there was definitely a pressure to me where it's like, okay, if I just let the cards fall, if I just let genetics be genetics, I'm also trained in genetics and epigenetics. If I just let that happen to me as a victim, quote unquote, then what tends to happen is I'll just get it. It's like almost like the flu, like, oh, well, your grandmother was schizophrenic and your mother had mental illness. So, pretty much and that just was not going to be my fate. And also, my mother's bathroom growing up looked like a Walgreens pharmacy. And so I knew that medication wasn't the answer either. And so I really sought out, when I left my home at 16 years old, to become, the healer that I am today. I really wanted to figure out how I could heal myself naturally. So there were periods where the anxiety was just so high that I did have to take, some benzodiazepines just to manage that, right? But it was a short period of time. I've also taken supplements to help support. And so I'm not against or oppose those things, but I want you to know that it doesn't just give you a pass. You still have to take personal responsibility and ownership for your health, and also recognize that it's not about the blaming, the shaming, the ignoring, the pushing down, and not just blanketed forgiving. It's really about accepting, where you are and what has occurred, and facing it, processing through it, and then coming to the other side of it. So let's see. So the mind has 3 parts to it. Okay. We're going to talk about the 3 distinct parts: the primitive mind, the subconscious mind, and then our conscious mind. So without further ado, we'll kind of jump into the primitive mind. So the primitive mind is that reptilian part of our brain. It's the instinctual aspect of it. It gets triggered really from 2 basic things. It's either fear or love. So like if you have pets, you can definitely see this, 1 minute they love you, and then if they see something, like a bird or something, like they're like, or chasing after it or whatever. And so there's really 2 distinct aspects of our primitive mind. It's fear or love, right? If we choose love, right, we choose to accept ourselves, we choose to accept the world, we're in this place of forgiveness. It's all beautiful, it's all wonderful, etc. Our limbic system is really picking that up. All of our emotions, we're bonding, the oxytocin, the serotonin, all that stuff is just oozing from us. However, if we choose fear, there's common 3 reactions. There's fight, flight, or freeze. And we all kind of have our own certain flavors. When it comes to fighting, it's not like literally you're, in the back. Well, some people are in the back, scrapping or whatever. But fighting can be something as like, I'm going to pick a fight with this person, even though I don't want them to talk about it, or I'm irritated, or I'm going to cuss somebody out over the phone because I didn't get my way, or I'm going to cut somebody off, because, how dare they get in front of me, or whatever. Like it's that energy of anger, right? Because when we have anger, it gets people away from us, right? So fighting really represents that anger response, or that anger response, right? So flight is like running away. That can be avoidance. It can be procrastination. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to look at this. I'm going to shut down. I don't want to see this. I just want this to go away. And then freezing is I'm immobilized. Like I can't, like I'm so overwhelmed, right? I used to, have all these papers, right, on my desk when I was working. And, I would like, get all these sensations of overwhelmed, and then because all these papers are piling up, and then I go, oh my gosh, I have to like organize them, and then I'd organize them and I'd be like, okay, I feel good again, and then they would build back up and they would build back up. Well, I finally realized after multiple sections of this, that the reason I was building these papers up was really, it was almost to, as a conquistador of chaos, to overcome all the chaos of all of my papers, to give myself some little false sense of self-esteem, because I was able to organize them, right? And so when I became aware of that distinction, I no longer needed to live in the world of overwhelm. But many people, that's how they function through life. They just absolutely do not know what to do at any given time, and they're looking for somebody to save them, or fix it for them. And I'm here to tell you that nobody is going to come for you. I would love it if they did. And if there's people, on white horses that, gallop about, please direct them to many, many places that need that type of assistance. But for the most part, 99.99% of us, we have to save ourselves. And so, but it's also an extension of fear. And so when you're overwhelmed and you just don't know, then, you're going to go to whatever tool from your tool bag you have, right? So if you're more of a fighter, you got, words to say or things to do. If you're a flighter, like I'm out, or you're just a freezer, you're like, oh my God, I don't know, analysis paralysis. Everybody has their own flavor of it. Hopefully after this, you'll be a little bit more aware of what yours is. The subconscious mind. So that was the primitive mind. So the subconscious mind, that is going to be, and I'm going to just make sure that there's nothing in the chat. Okay. So the subconscious mind, that's all the past. That's your experiences, perceptions of those experiences, which are just stories you tell yourself, beliefs, and then core beliefs, right? So you have these experiences 0 to 8 years old. That's when the subconscious mind is developing. Some say 0 to 5, I say 0 to 8. So you have these experiences, the world is an amazing place, and then something happens. You make a story up about it. It can be true. It could be not be true. It doesn't, there's nothing that, is telling you otherwise, right? So for me, 0 to 8 was pretty hardcore, but my parents got divorced when I was 2, not to mention the fact that the Marine Corps at the time did not value family. So not only did my parents separate and divorce, but then the Marine Corps would station one in one place and one in the other place. And, when they stationed them in Japan, there was no children. So I was left with, babysitters who were not the safest of humans. And so at least for 4-year-old little girls. And so the thing really happened is I made up all these stories, right, about my worth, about protection, about my dad, where is my dad? I mean, all these stories, right? And then I created beliefs about myself. And then from those beliefs, right, like let's say I'm not important, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not safe, and then those beliefs start to cement more into core beliefs, right? So now these core beliefs I'm going to defend, right? So if let's say I attract a partner, right, who is not safe, right, I'm going to continue to defend that core belief within myself that I'm not safe. So I'm going to choose partners that are not safe, because I believe that in myself and my subconscious mind that I'm not safe. So if you're not aware, majority of your conscious awareness, this is a Carl Jung philosophy, if you allow your subconscious to remain unconscious, it's going to drive your life, and you're going to call it fate. And so if you don't come to terms with your past experiences, your perceptions of those experiences, your beliefs, and your core beliefs of these experiences, you're going to continue to manifest and have the life that you absolutely tolerate and you are frustrated about and you don't like, and you're going to have partner after partner, and failures after failures, and stress and aggravation and disease and all the things. So not to be totally uplifting on this Monday afternoon, but that's the reality that we're at. But that's why you're here. You're taking a proactive stance to learn more about what you can do about it. So now we move on to the conscious mind. This is where most of us live. This is our logic, our voice, our reason, our decision making. We can't see our subconscious mind, which is why that iceberg was there. Like, you can't see it, right? The only way you access the subconscious mind is through your emotions, your emotional body. So if you're emotionally shut down, it's going to be really difficult to transform that subconscious mind. So the people that are shut down tend to use logic a lot more. So they're going to use their reason, their decision making, but ultimately the conscious mind is going to receive its marching orders from the subconscious mind. So the conscious mind and the subconscious mind have to agree for things to happen. The subconscious mind is about 88% of our conscious awareness, and the conscious mind is only about 12%. So we're getting most of the marching orders from the subconscious mind. So, there's no way out. You really have to work on it. So the ego, which we talked about, is going to help. We didn't talk about it, but what it does is it's going to defend. So all those defense mechanisms we have, that's your ego, right? And it's monitoring, it's looking for, it's assessing. It's like the night watchman. It's always looking for offenses, right? It's looking for, I say it's looking to be offended, but it's really more so looking to see if there's some threat that the subconscious mind perceives, right? Now, the threat doesn't always have to be a quote unquote negative threat. In a healthy, balanced person, right? It is healthy, right? Like, you see, oh, I'm being chased by a tiger, maybe I should run. Or it's going, oh my gosh, there's a bus coming, maybe I should move. In a healthy individual, it's going to assess for safety of actual danger. In an unhealthy, unbalanced, traumatized, wounded emotionally person, it's going to assess for all sorts of things that may or may not be reality. And it's going to distort and filter things that may not be. So somebody can say something, then the ego gets offended. How dare she? What could she? Blah, blah, it gets triggered, and then it reacts, right? And once you react, you're totally in your primitive mind. You're totally in that lizard brain. You're totally in the fight or flight response, and whatever flavor works well with you. So when we start to kind of dissect this, you'll start to become more present and more aware of your triggers. And it takes time. It's like a muscle, like anything else, like going to the gym. I remember early on in my practice, people, it's funny, I work with humans all day, right? So you can't ever seem to get away from these humans. So I work with them and I treat them, and they fascinate me on so many levels. However, early on in my career, I would get very triggered, right? And, it's kind of frowned upon to, yell at your patients, or, tell your patients off, or, storm out of the room or whatever. So I had to really learn how to be with my emotions, right? Put those aside, right? And then be able to be objective. So I was able to suspend judgment, right? Whatever's triggering me, because sometimes people come and they're not well, and, they're frustrated and they're let down by the medical community. And, they want somebody to have it, pretty much. They want to beat somebody up. They want to blame somebody. They want to, personality, right? They want to control, they want to manipulate, whatever they feel like they need to do in order to survive. And then, me wanting to help and support or whatever, having to learn how to go, okay, this is me, and I need to put this aside, right? I'm going to journal, write this down, and work on this later when I have a spare moment, but I need to suspend this judgment and really learn how to be present and aware with this person. And then eventually the triggers got less and less and less. And I was able to be more present fully with the people and really hear for what was going on, and then being able to assist them with whatever tool technique that they need in order to help them through their process. So it does take time. It's not a light switch. So really be very, very patient with yourself. And so with that being said, right, when we're building consciousness, right, which is the process of becoming aware. So we're starting to look at ourselves. We're starting to see ourselves. We're starting to be present, right? We're slowing down. Our thoughts create our feelings. So what you're telling yourself all the time, you're telling yourself things as I'm going over these concepts, some of you maybe goes like, whatever. Some of you is like, yeah, some of you are maybe thinking, oh yeah. So you're always generating thoughts. Now these thoughts may not be your own, right? And so I know that it may seem that way because you're hearing this, right? But in fact, we have the ego that's always running. We have, intuition that's always going in the world. We're all, connected based off the quantum field. And that's all scientifically proven. That's not woo-woo. And so you can feel it even if somebody comes into the room and they're upset, you can pick that up and, now you start, oh, is it me? What's going on? We just are innately, in tune with our surroundings as well as ourselves. So we have thoughts. Most of us are thinking, hypervigilance. So if you've been through any kind of trauma, like I had, part of the reason why I didn't sleep very well is because I was hypervigilant. So when I would go to sleep, right, my brain is going, even if my eyes were closed, because my brain is telling my body, there's going to be some sort of unsafe situation. So you can't really rest. You can't allow yourself to be vulnerable, because if you do, something bad could potentially happen. And so our thoughts then create our feelings. So then it's like this anxiety and fear and nervousness and, oh my gosh. And then the actions, right? I'm going to act out of that. I'm going to be short. I'm going to be, obviously tired because I'm not going to get enough sleep, right? And then I'm going to wake up, or deep sleep. And then I'm going to kind of wake up and be like, oh, forget it. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. I'm not going to get breakfast. I'll just grab, something, quick on the way, which there's nothing healthy that's quick on the way. Let's be real. And so, then I go in and okay, I've grabbed that. And that's my habit. And I do that day in and day out and day in and day out. And now all of a sudden those habits create my lifestyle. And now I look up and I'm like, why am I depressed? Why do I feel bad? Why am I, we really get so caught up in our thoughts and our feelings. Now we'll learn there are certain people that choose not to feel, and they bypass the feelings. They just go from thoughts to actions, and you'll notice they're typically more nervous. We'll talk about those types of people. They're always in action mode. They can never sit down. They're always going. They're always doing. They're always checking stuff off the list. Boom, 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 boom. It's because if they stop, then all the feelings are going to come, and they don't want to feel. So it's best to keep it moving. And so they bypass their feelings until eventually it kind of smacks them in the face, and then they have to deal with it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right. So 3 types of people when it comes to managing their emotions, right? There's the shutdown people, which we'll talk about. There's the non-self-regulating people, which we'll talk about. And then there's the balanced people. We're at a shortage of balanced people, just FYI. Most people are going to be, shut down to non-self-regulating. And usually we'll go over the characteristics, but usually you're kind of one type or the other. And I learned this, again, not from books, but actually I used to be a shutdown person, right? And the reason I was a shutdown person is because my mother was a non-self-regulating person, right? So she would fly off the handle and go from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. And so I was like, okay, that's not healthy. I don't want to be that, right? And then my dad was more of a shutdown person. But then there was a lot of shame from both parents about feeling, right? So I learned from an early age that feelings were not safe, feelings were not healthy, feelings were not like what you do. And so I ended up shutting them all down, and then obviously self-medicating and doing different things to be able to pacify those emotions. And so I went from emotionally shut down, and then I learned how to feel again, to like, whoa, non-self-regulating, because all these emotions were super big. And finally now I'm more balanced than I ever have been. And again, that's without medication. I don't take supplements and things like, I do, but not any for my neuro health. Not anymore anyway. Okay, so let's talk about the people that are shut down. So they tend to ignore their emotions. Like I was telling you, they tend to self-medicate, whether that's through sex, alcohol, TV, you name it. I mean, they just do whatever in order to pacify how they're feeling. They typically have one of two emotions, that's neutral or pissed off. And so again, anger is a protective emotion. So that's why they can become easily defensive if emotions are brought up. So if somebody goes, hey, I've got, this issue, whatever, what, who, me, blah, blah, and then they go into kind of being defensive. They're unable to hear your emotions. And the reason that is because if they have to hear your emotions, then that means that they have to acknowledge their own emotions, and they're hiding from their own emotions. So if I'm hiding from my own emotions and you're talking about your emotions, that's going to make me very uncomfortable, because the more that you want to talk about your emotions, the more I have to actually deal with my own emotions, or the lack thereof. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to just go away. I'm going to tune you out. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to shut you down, etc. They're also unable to acknowledge your emotions. So I know I spelled that wrong. Knowledge, hopefully I spelled it right. Okay. Yeah, they're unable to acknowledge yours, because again, that's recognizing, that's accepting, oh, I have emotions, right? And so they're not going to be able to process it. And I want you to know that neither one of these is wrong or bad. This is just a coping strategy that we have all chosen in order to survive life, because very few of us, and I mean very few, were raised in this world of, oh, it's safe to feel and you can feel your emotions, and oh, I see that you're angry, oh, I see that you're frustrated, okay, here's a 10-point list of what you can do to be able to feel better, and oh, this feels good, and we're going to soothe your, most of it, if you got that, amazing, right? Amazing. Hats off to your parents. Most of us, it was like, I'll give you something to cry about. It was shut it down. It was, you better not. It was like, I mean, it was absolute crazy. And so many of us pendulum swing the opposite direction with our children. I know I did, where very much coddling and like, oh my gosh, and if we, spoke the wrong thing and they acted like, you beat them or whatever, you felt bad and, guilted and everything else. And so there's a balance, which is why the balanced emotional part is probably the safest place to go. But they also have a hard time opening up or being vulnerable to other people. They're often very stoic, they're very like rigid, and they're not really in touch. I've dated a lot of engineers, ironically, and a lot of times engineers, I forgive me if there are any engineers on the line, but they tend to be more logical, and so there's like 10,000 miles between the head and the heart, and so they tend to feel safer in their thoughts, and so getting into their emotions is it's a challenge, and it's very confronting, and you don't have control over it anymore, and then the ego gets kicked up and all kinds of stuff. They also withhold emotions, because oftentimes people that are shut down will attract more non-self-regulating people, and so they're going to tend to, they know that you want more emotional support, encouragement, or whatever. So if they can't deal with their emotions, talk about their emotions, express their emotions, process their emotions, they're going to withhold as a form of punishment, not specifically to you, but to themselves, because they're feeling bad. They feel guilty. They feel like they need to be punished. They feel like, having emotions is wrong, and there's something wrong with them, because that was the message that they got, was when you have an emotion, there's something wrong with you and you need to go and fix it. And so that's the tendency to withhold their emotions. They also gaslight you because their perception of reality tends to be a little bit different. Oh no, I didn't make you feel that way. I did, or what's the classic thing they say all the time? It's something like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Oh my God, it's like, I feel that way because some incident to which you did. And so that affected me in this way. You're not responsible for, my emotions. However, but they're like, no, that's your issue and you have to deal with it, and they're really just do not want to go there. But they are usually very charming at first, that's what kind of gets you attracted or why you want to be around them, because they do overcompensate in other areas. They tend to you know, be very successful or very good looking, or, they have, other charming qualities. But then when you start to kind of peel back those layers, it's very much a shell. And a lot of times shut down people have deep-seated issues with abandonment. They've been abandoned as children, they've been abandoned emotionally, they've been emotionally starved. And so as a form of self-protection, again, that's why they kind of shut down. And sometimes that can get to the point of pathology, right? Where, they become like narcissists or actually, they struggle with abandonment issues. And that's why they're so shut down. It's very much a self-protective a way of operating in life, not necessarily because they're trying to be destructive. Now, there are some that will take on those, destructive traits, and that's kind of more on the sociopathic side. But, and again, this is not about pathology per se. This is more so for you to have an understanding. But at the root of it, though, they really crave intimacy. They want to be close. They want, to be loved, but they're so afraid of it. So they often do those kind of push-pull situations, like come here, go away. And so they tend to be, if you follow the attachment styles, they tend to be more of an avoidant attachment style. So they'll kind of pull away, that withhold sort of thing if they start to feel something. And then, when they feel safe again, then they'll open up and they'll get closer. And then start to kind of build that intimacy and then go, oh my gosh, oh no, and then run away. So it's really because they have a very difficult time processing through their emotions, dealing with their emotions. The sooner that a person can begin to feel safe with their emotions, the better off that they're going to be in order to develop deeper, intimate relationships. So there is that. Okay, so let me find, all right. So the non-self-regulators, love these people, by the way. they're typically the creatives and the expressives, and but they are all over the place. So they typically are very anxious. They're very gregarious. At the same time, they can fly off the handle at a moment's notice. One minute everything's good, the next minute, who just knows? You kind of you're always in for a good time with this person, but you absolutely never know what that good time is going to look like. Fear for your safety a little bit. So they can blurt things out totally like off the wall field because they have super big emotions, but they really don't know how to handle their emotions well. So it's like their emotions almost are like a whole nother world to themselves, right? And they're just kind of reacting to them. But they definitely wear their emotions on their sleeve, and they have big hearts. At the same time, they tend to not have boundaries and balance, and they tend to not know, where their lines begin and end. And a lot of that has to do with the loss of executive functioning. So that's going to be prefrontal cortex. So logic, reason, decision making, is not necessarily going to be on their strong suits. When they actually have a, emotional reaction, like everybody can see it, everybody can feel it, everybody knows that they're upset, look out, oh my gosh, they are definitely dealing with a lot, and everyone around them is dealing with a lot, and they can almost hold you hostage to their emotions, because you're almost like not allowed to have an emotion outside of their emotion. So that's something too to be mindful of as well. And again, like these are extremes. So there could definitely be some, cross contamination, if you will, but I definitely want you to see the dichotomy so that you can identify it in yourself as well as with other people. And we'll talk about strategies, for these if you see yourself in any of these. They can also make it very uncomfortable because if they have super big emotions and they expect, like they tend to be offended really easily. So it's like, it's either you're for me or against me, right? And if you're against me, oh my gosh, I'm upset. I can't believe, they're not very rational in their thinking. They're not logical. They're not even. They're more of my way or the highway. And if you're not in my camp, then again, like I have to defend myself. They can yell, super big emotions. They can throw, they can act out, they can tantrum, because they're really emotionally underdeveloped. Both parties are emotionally underdeveloped, but they tend to get very visibly upset. So lots of tears, lots of big energy, which can be very intense, especially oftentimes these two people are paired, right? You tend to have a shutdown person with a non-self-regulating person. So the non-self-regulator feels for everybody and the shutdown person runs away from the emotion, which makes the non-self-regulator even more crazy. So you can see how these people just love to attract each other. They're typically very anxious. We talked about that before. And they like to talk about their emotions. So they love to, like, if something happens, doesn't matter what it is, they love to jump on the phone. They love to talk about, they love to process. They love to, they're always wanting these kind of in-depth kind of conversation. But you'll notice that when you're talking to them, it's almost the same thing over and over and over again. They never really kind of like come to a resolution. There's never a solution. It's just, I have feelings. These are my feelings. I'm justified in my feelings. There's no other way. I can't, because they really want to see themselves as the victim. So they want that sympathy. They want you to empathize with them. And then if you do, it's almost like, I gotcha. And this is all unconscious. This is all in the subconscious mind. This is not consciously. Most people look at these two things and go, that's not me, because the conscious mind is going to refute it. The conscious mind would be like, no, I can tell you, I've been both of these people. I've been the shutdown person. And when I worked on actually feeling, I've been the non-self-regulator. So I've been on, this is why I can describe these two, dichotomies of each other so well and intimately, because I've been able to become self-aware enough to observe it in myself. And now I'm balanced because I've done the work. But unless you do the work, you're going to keep facing yourself. So like I said, they want others to side with them, and they are very manipulative. They tend to be the anxious attachment style. Again, if you're in the attachment style, education, if you will, there's some good books out there about that. But they definitely like that kind of, come here, go away kind of situation. So executive functioning really is shut off. That's all of the more logical thinking, that's, assessing, and they can get very overwhelmed easily just because of all of their emotions and emotional upsets. All right. So now I went on all that roller coaster ride. Balanced, right? So, once you go from shut down to, oh my gosh, non-self, it's like everything is a big thing. Then you start to sift and sort. Oh, the other thing I didn't tell about the non-self-regulators is a lot of times it's a nervous system issue. So a lot of people that have been traumatized are non-self-regulators, and their nervous system is really what is experiencing all the bigness. And then the non-self-regulators do tend to be more empaths. And so that's why they attract the shutdown people, because innately they want to help, heal, fix, etc. But if they don't help and heal themselves, they're not going to be balanced. And that's really where you want to be. The shutdown people, unfortunately, if they don't come out of it, again, they just box themselves in more and more and more, and they become more and more and more alienated and become, they start to believe the conscious mind, the ego mind starts to believe its stories. And then they become more and more and more defensive, and they begin to really self-protect and are unable to see they are triggered by pretty much everything and everyone, and will create confrontation subtly or not so subtly. So if you're a non-self-regulator, good job, because you've come out of the shutdown mode, right? If you're in the shutdown mode, that you want to get to the non-self-regulating, and it's normal to go from one extreme to another, not necessarily get to go to balance, but you would think, oh, shut down, balance, and then self. It's really, you have to relearn how to feel your emotions again. So it's almost like, you're on a tricycle, right? You start off with a tricycle, and then, you grow up to the big bike, and then they, have the training wheels on and then take them off, so you have to relearn and build that muscle. So balance people, once you've done all that, you feel your emotions, but you don't make other people responsible for how you feel. Like, you can communicate from a place of power. So I'll give you an example. So I'm in this energetic training course. It's a form of psychotherapy called family constellation, and it's an energetic modality, and it's a year-long program. And what happens is there's a lot of transference in the cohort. So there was a communication that I had, and I was triggered by the professor, and I instantly like shut down and retreated, right? And I had to like get my energy back into, like, I had to recreate myself and get my energy back into my field. Now, in the past, right, non-self-regulating Erica would have cussed some people out, right, and made people responsible, and how dare you, and blah, all the things, right? But because I've been doing this work for so long, I was able to stop, feel the feelings that I was feeling, reach out to a couple people that I trust and know, and that I know how to hold space. And I just needed to reconnect with myself and reconnect with my energy and reconnect with other people. And then I was able to go back and have a conversation with my professor and just let her know what space I was in, and like, hey, this came up for me, and this is my experience, and this is what was being triggered. And of course, she was like, so gracious and so apologetic, and really I didn't need her to apologize, but she did. She acknowledged and validated what I felt, which obviously is going to help me feel better. But I had been able to process on my own already. So by the time I had the conversation with her, I was in such a stable place, right? Where the old me would have vomited all over her, and wouldn't have cared one way or the other because she deserved it or whatever. So you're very in touch with your emotions. And then what happens is you begin to become more in touch with your intuition. And then you become, if you're a woman, you become more empowered with your divine feminine. And then you begin to manifest more. And then things just happen and come to you, and you are able to hear that divine, action, or that inspired action that comes to you for your next step. Like, you really, what I have found is once you start to really work on your emotional body, you begin to really be able to connect more with your intuition, more your higher self, more your godlike force within yourself. And so it allows you to be able to really live the life, that you want to live. So you still become triggered. So I told you about a situation, but you learn how to sit with your emotions. Like, I remember with my practice, like, there was this guy years ago. He came in for a consultation with me, and my consultations are like $200 and includes a follow-up. And so our initial appointment is like, it's booked for an hour. And so we're talking, whatever. And, I'm like, hey, do you have anything else? Blah, 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 and he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? And I ask usually 3 times if, somebody has questions or whatever. So he only exhausted like 30 minutes. So I said, okay, well, we're good. If there's nothing else, like, I'll send you off to get your labs, whatever. And so he called very upset because he's like, I thought this was going to be an hour, and this $200 I thought was going to include all this lab work. And I was like, no, well, but I called him and I sued them. And I was like, I spent even more time. I spent about 45 minutes with him, helping him to understand and helping him to process and all the things. Right. So then he came back and I thought we were good. So he comes back for the review. And I go over the labs with him and, very detailed and thorough. I had come up with a very large lab report and go over in detail every little thing. And so I said, hey, do you have any other questions? And he says, no. And so instead he grabs the brochure and opens it up and points and he goes, see, this is what's wrong with your marketing. He goes, this and this and this, right? And it was what he was referencing was a design element, but he was still holding on to this thing that like $200 included, like, and the amount of labs he thought that was included with $200 was like laughable. Like I was like, what? But he was implying, right? Or at least that I perceived that I was like ripping him off, right? And I could feel like the rage like coming up from like the core of the earth, right? And so, but I'm holding it and I'm being with it and I'm like, okay, great. And so I said, okay, I totally understand. And so I walked him up front and I said, you know what? Go ahead and refund him his money. Thank you so much. And he was just like, like I was not going to feed into it. So then I had to come back, right? And then I had to move right into, I couldn't sit there and be angry and be with my emotion. I just couldn't. I had to then go, I had another patient who, this particular patient really in her head a lot and a lot of, spiritual trauma, which we'll talk about. And so very triggered. And so I have to be so present and so on my game. And so like every word choice is like critical mass. And so my job requires me to be super present. And so I couldn't process through that emotion until after I was done with her. And then I was able to like journal, write it out. But so, you learn how to compartmentalize. However, you learn how to compartmentalize it to process it later. You don't compartmentalize and just go, okay, cool. Let's go, burn some, let's go chill and burn some of the stress off. And I'm going to go, grab a beer or cocktail after dinner. No, you learn how to process it and then, or hold it and then journal it and work through it later. And so I could articulate like, okay, so moving forward, right? I only want people that come to my practice that value the work that I do, that honor the work that I do, that aren't trying to take more and more and more from me. Like, and that is my creation even to this day. So I'm very communicative naturally with that particular patient. He wasn't going to hear. I had already communicated to him. He still wanted to hold on to it because his thought process was he wanted to be right. And I just am not going to play that game. And so not interested, but I was able to communicate where I was at, what I stood, et cetera, et cetera. He was unable to accept it. So we part, we just part. Right. So you also feel very safe with your emotions, and therefore you're safe and grounded in your emotional upsets. You don't let your emotional upsets overtake you. It doesn't mean you're perfect all the time. It means that you're able to catch yourself. Like there was a guy that I dated. He was from, where was he from? He was from Ghana, right? And if you know anything about Africans and African culture, like they're very loud and very, and he loved to yell, and yelling was a trigger for me. And I would say to him, like, please, lower your voice, whatever. And he, this is just how we are, right? And so he would yell. And then some things he would yell that were totally just inappropriate, right? And non-self-regulating, right? And so at that time I was very imbalanced. So I listened to what he said and I go, okay, is that for me? Yes or no? Does that work for me? Yes or no? And eventually I ended up, ending the relationship because his emotional upsets were so big and we couldn't have a calm, relaxed conversation. Like it was always some big, something. And then, it was always trying to create it where I was the problem or I had, things to work on and fix. And while we all have things to work on and fix, we also can't be the scapegoat, and we have to be personally responsible for our own mental and emotional state, right? We cannot take that and project it onto another person, and it's not the other person's responsibility to fix us. That's where codependency comes in, where either you want to try to want to be fixed or you want to rescue. So either you're the victim needing to be rescued, or you are the rescuer looking to save the victim. But both strategies are the victim, because then when neither one of those strategies work, that's when you become the persecutor. And that's the victim triangle. We're not going to get too much into victim consciousness, but just know that when you are in a victim consciousness, you perceive the world as happening to you. You perceive that everything that is occurring is happening as a response to everything external. You do not want to take personal responsibility for what's occurring in your life. And so, you want to begin to break out of that and begin to observe yourself. And we'll begin to get into some of those strategies. But they also have balanced people have healthy relationships. They have unhealthy emotions, they have healthy emotions, and I believe all emotions are healthy, whether they're up or down, but they really possess coping mechanisms to handle their emotions in a healthy way. So they're not projecting them, they're being responsible for them, they're not tolerating, certain behaviors of other people, they have boundaries, etc. All right, so now, if you are a shutdown person, if you're a shutdown person or you're aware of a shutdown person, these are some of the strategies for the way out. However, if you are engaged or with, and when I say engaged, I mean like involved with a shutdown person, it is not your responsibility to now tell this shutdown person what they need to do, because most of the time they are not going to listen to you. So again, we talked about codependency, we talked about rescuing. It's not going to work. Trust me, I've done it all. And so being shut down, if you are a shutdown person, you want to resist the urge on focusing on the other people, because shutdown people love to focus on everybody else. Everybody else is the problem, because then it deflects and they don't have to deal with themselves, right? And so please, recognize that your emotions are safe. So one of the techniques that I personally used to get myself out of emotional shutdown was emotional freedom technique, which is otherwise known as tapping. It's EFT. And you can Google YouTube different tapping. I love Brad Yates. He's a great YouTuber. I used him for years. And pretty much in the Eastern world, right, the bioenergetic frequencies, your meridian systems. So Eastern medicine predates our Western medicine by over 10,000 years. And the Eastern culture believes in the importance of emotional health and well-being, mental health and well-being. And they do understand the validity to our physical body, because if you continue to shut down your emotions, meaning you continue to compartmentalize and don't process these emotions in your organs, it does create disease process. And so, and that's been proven. That's part of my PhD that I'm starting in psychoneuroimmunology, the emotional manifestations of disease. And so it's been studied and documented and all kinds of things. So tapping does a few things. It helps move the energy, because emotions are low frequency, especially like anger, frustration, etc. You can, Google different frequencies of emotions, but just for the sake of understanding, you want to bring those emotions up learn to be with them. And then so you validate your emotions, right? So you do a setup statement. It's like tapping, you go, even though I'm emotionally shut down, on the side of the hand and then the top of the head, even though I'm emotionally shut down, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And so even though I'm emotionally shut down, I know deep down that my emotions are safe, right? And so that just gives you kind of an example. Again, you guys can YouTube a whole bunch of these different techniques, or all these different things where you can like watch the people do it and you can do it well. But what I learned is when I started to do EFT and started to freeing up some of these emotions, I've also done emotion code too. That's another energetic modality, and it's really good for heart walls. So if you've had deep betrayals and things like that, it can really help with that. But then what I would do is when I start to identify an emotion, I would journal it. Oh my God, that's joy. That's this, that's it. So I remember, at this time I was still, I was building my business. I was doing a lot of like networking events and luncheons and all the kind of thing, get my name out there. And I remember being in the parking lot, right? And, I've got my journal out and I'm like doing this EFT in the car. Other people are probably walking by like, this lady's nuts. But I would do this and I'd be like, oh my God, that's what, that's what, oh God, I don't even remember. That's what worthiness feels like. That's what joy feels like. That's what, that's what sorrow feels like, like I kind of, a little bit on the dramatic side. So, like I would go, oh my God, like I would be so happy to feel my emotions again. Other things that I used to do, I would watch really sad movies because it could allow me to cry. So if you don't cry ever, you're probably emotionally shut down. So I would watch really sad, and we're talking like tragic, like Requiem for a Dream, like really bad stuff. I would watch, and it was like, it would help me to cry, and there would be like this cathartic feeling, and I'd be crying about whatever craziness is on television, but it would give me that space to be able to cry. Now at that time I wasn't emotionally healthy enough to then make those connections. I just did that so that I could have what made sense for me at the time to cry, like, because you just don't cry. You just got to keep surviving. You got to keep going. I was a student. I was a single mom, like you just don't have time to cry. Right. So I would watch a movie, and in that movie, I would just bawl my eyes out. Right. Later on, I learned about emotional freedom technique and emotion codes and started learning journaling. And that's what really started kind of unearthing all of these emotions for me. And then I had to learn what to do with them. You really want to get present to them by slowing down. Meditation and breath work is really helpful. Breathing through things, slowing down through things. And then Dr. Joe Dispenza, his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, is very heady and very logical, which is why I chose that book. There's lots of books, thousands of books that I could recommend, but for somebody that's emotionally shut down, they need a little bit more of a headier book, a little bit more of a logical book, and Dispenza definitely delivers in that perspective. So if you're a non-self-regulator, you want to, again, don't focus on other people. So if you're like, my partner is, it's like, no, like just put on your oxygen mask. Again, recognize that it's safe. Even no matter how big your emotions are, you're safe, right? That's the big thing. Breath work, but it's specifically vagal nerve exercises. Again, you can YouTube these. Vagal nerve, it runs through, it helps, it assists in your parasympathetic, your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight mechanism. And so when you've been through any kind of trauma, that vagal nerve gets activated, your nervous system becomes activated. And that is also why you feel so much and feel so big, because the nervous system has been jilted, if you will. Kundalini yoga, if you're okay with yoga, it does have a lot of great nervous system related breath work. It also has great breath work for anger, really good emotions for breath work for forgiveness. It has very good specific breath work for specific emotions. And it helps to re-regulate your nervous system. It helped me tremendously in learning how to re-regulate my nervous system. Affirmations were also really helpful too. So I dated this guy for 2 years in Alexandria, and he was a great guy, and he was very sensitive, and I didn't want to hurt him, but he had this tone that would trigger me and send me through the roof. And I would have to like take a breath and go, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And it takes about 45 seconds for all those neurochemicals. So you will feel like an assault is happening, even if nothing's happening physically. And so you've got to get through, the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, all that. You have to get through all of this. It takes about 45 seconds. It feels like an eternity. But that's where breath really comes in handy. And that's where affirming, that you're safe really comes in handy. Because like, I used to have a mouth, like bad mouth. And so like I would get triggered and it would be like, remember fight or flight? I was a fight girl. So, I would react and then I'd have to learn how to just shut up. Like that took me just a month just to learn how to shut my mouth. And then breathing, that took about another month. Right. And then finally I was able to find words, like I'm safe, that took another month just because my nervous system was so dysregulated. Everything that anything happened, I would go from 0 to 60. Early on coaches that I've had, poor things. I'm so sorry for, because I would just let them all have it because my nervous system was so not self-regulated. So everything is in perfect order, regardless of appearances, whether I believe this or not. That's an excellent affirmation. I used to use that all the time, especially, when I was driving and I was like, I had really bad post-traumatic stress. Really bad. And so like I could, and I was in car accidents and broke my neck in cars and stuff like that. So, I had like a really hard time, being in cars, right? So I would have to go, everything's in perfect order, regardless of appearances, whether I believe this or not, and I'd have to say, okay, what am I doing right now? I'm holding the wheel. I'm in the car. All the things that I would have to do to help bring myself into present awareness. Also slowing down and being in nature really helps people that are non-self-regulators, especially because, all the electromagnetic frequencies, putting your feet on the sand, putting your feet on the ground really helps ground. Essential oils like lavender, which is an adaptogen, can really help. There's also a lot of supplements that help, like holy basil or valerian, those kinds of things that can really help tone the nervous system down. And I chose Dr. Joseph Murphy, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, because a lot of times with the self-regulators, it is an impact of trauma. And so they're both impacts of trauma, but the non-self-regulators are more in touch with the sources of trauma, like it's right here, like you're just waiting to be set off, right? And so the power of the subconscious mind really helps you to come out of that victim consciousness and get more into a creator consciousness, one that you can manifest and create the life that you really love. And then if you're balanced, just so we have some dichotomy, so you have strong core values. So for me, I have personal core values, I have business core values. My personal core values are integrity. My words and my actions are congruent. Innovation, I always love to innovate, especially in my field. Authenticity, I like to show up who I am 100%. In structure, I value structure. I feel safe. Coming from such a crazy, chaotic background that I came from, I value structure so much. So, a lot of times, like some of the more kind of hippy dippy personalities, although I'm very creative and innovative and I'm in those circles a lot, if they lack structure, I don't feel safe. So I know for myself how to create boundaries and how to create those structures so that I can feel safe and my nervous system can feel safe, because I don't want to be triggered, right? I have emotional intelligence, and when you are emotionally balanced, you do have emotional intelligence. You have a high self-awareness, so you can observe yourself. You can see where you're at and where you need to go. You honor your weaknesses, you honor your strengths, you honor, where you are. You have excellent communication skills. You're able to be fully present and aware. My job requires me to be fully present and aware. I have to be thinking, listening, hearing, processing, you have to be fully on. I can't like drift off into la la land. And so You also have to be present to where your emotions are in any given time, especially relative to another individual. No matter how much work I've done, I'm always doing more. Personal growth, self-development really has been such an amazing part of my life. And so typically balanced people are gonna, even if it's just like, learning how to relax more, or it doesn't have to be some hard charging, really deep. I find that the more years that go by, actually, the lighter and lighter it gets. Like you have more fun with the personal self development, whereas like some of the early years, it was like super deep and heady. And you get into such a habit of looking at yourself, and you're open to constructive feedback from others. You trust the people in your circles, and you have really good emotional and stress management skills and tools. Like I have huge tool bags now of things that I can use for any situation. Of course, there's always the outliers, but for the most part, things are good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma, and then we'll finish up. Thank you guys so much for being patient. So a quick note on trauma. So trauma can be physical trauma. So like sexual abuse, physical abuse, those all classify, pretty much where somebody touches you inappropriately without your permission, or, violently, etc. Environmental trauma, that's going to be more of like poverty would be considered an environmental trauma. A lot of people have grown up in poverty, different things like that. Like if you were homeless, that's an environmental trauma. Or you didn't have, a healthy environment at home that, you, like, for instance, my mother with DID, you never knew, who and what and where and when and why at any given moment. She could throw a cast iron skillet in any moment. So you just don't know. Mental trauma as well. So that's more of like, when people call you names and, play head games with you and, gaslight you, that kind of stuff. Emotional trauma, that is another form of gaslighting, and different, they suppress you, put you down emotionally, etc. Spiritual trauma is related to like cults and, some kind of harsh, legalistic, spiritual, or religious, sects, those can be, spiritual trauma. And then ancestral trauma, that's trauma that's passed down in your DNA, whether that be from indigenous backgrounds like Native American or African, or even, Irish, English, most all of us have some sort of trauma in the back, German, etc., Judaism. And then some trauma strategies that we tend to utilize. So brain development, such as biofeedback, brain entrainment, neurofeedback, EMDR, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Traditional talk therapy does not actually work for trauma. In fact, it makes it worse. So I went through years of traditional therapies, and it just re-traumatized me. So I learned pretty quickly that that was not something. That's why I got into like clinical hypnotherapy and some of the other modalities. Support groups can be helpful if there's a structure, but a lot of times people will grow out of support groups. They're good, like stepping stone from like chaos to some sort of structure. And then usually people graduate out of it. And you want to have structure and integrity to create that safe space. And you're really learning to trust oneself again. And that's all part of the healing processes. Plant medicines, I've experienced many plant medicines and administered many plant medicines as well. They are very helpful in healing from trauma. I just got back from Peru not long ago, and worked with some shamans out there with ayahuasca. And so, there's a lot of really help in that. I mean, I think one sitting was like 20 years worth of therapy. I kid you not. It was very powerful. Really helpful too for incest and ancestral trauma like that, sexual trauma like that. It's very powerful. And then, there are various trauma modalities that we use. We use a lot of biofeedback and brain entrainment and vibroacoustics in our practice. So just to summarize, and then we're almost done. Thank you guys for being so patient. And so, mental health is an ongoing practice. And it's important to really work on your mental and emotional health, because if you don't, unfortunately, it will create all kinds of different issues, both with your relationships, that's your interpersonal relationships, your work relationships, your work growth. You'll sabotage, at a certain point. Also, it can help with, it'll impact your self-esteem, your self-worth, your physical health. You start to not take care of yourself, depression, anxiety, nervousness, etc. You start to not trust yourself, trust other people, you make bad choices, etc. And eventually it just manifests into a snowball. I mean, I treat a lot of people, even with end of life care, and a lot of times it's a lot of, especially cancers and things like that, a lot of suppressed emotion. And those tend to be people that are shut down and get really good at hiding their emotions, and it gets stored and stuck in different organs and organ systems, and then eventually creates disease on the bioenergetic level, excuse me, biochemical level. Emotions start on the bioenergetic level. So it's just really, really important that everyone really work on their emotions and their emotional health and well-being. That can really, really help even transform their physical health. Last but not least, so again, in our practice, I do mind-body medicine consultations. I'm a trained clinical hypnotherapist. I do a lot in that space. I don't have to do like the inductions. I mean, I can do those too, but typically I do just a lot like what we're talking and that kind of thing. You're sitting up, no big deal. Cranial electrostimulation, which helps with depression, insomnia, and anxiety. Brain entrainment, which is more for the conscious mind. Vibroacoustics, which can help with trauma and nervous system and hormonal dysregulation. Biofeedback, which helps with the conscious and the subconscious mind. Neurofeedback and neurostem, which that's specifically for trauma. We do have a 30 days to emotional healing, which is an online course. It's all of my tips, tricks, everything that I have learned, and things that work. It's like you get an app and it goes on your phone, and every single day, you get an email as well as a little thing, and it has a video of a technique to do. So you'll have at the end of it 30 days worth of emotional healing techniques to put in your tool bag, because most of us got nothing in their tool bag. And then let me see, I will send out to everybody that registered for this particular seminar. I'll give you a 10 email self-love series going all over different aspects of self-love and self-worth. And of course, you'll get a replay of this particular webinar that we did today. And so, you'll be able to review it at your leisure, because I know we jammed in a lot of information in a short period of time. So with all of that being said, do you guys have any questions for me? And I will hang out for a few more minutes. Yes, you are very, very welcome. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful. I hope you guys learned some fun things. Back in the day, there was nothing. We were just like, we were labeled. We were labeled as, I think at one point I was labeled bipolar, manic depressive. Nobody thought to maybe get the connection that, maybe my home life wasn't very healthy. And so I'm very much opposed to labeling the kids. A lot of times when kids are having different situations, right, we always look at the home, and that's why I'm in family practice, to really help heal the home and the family unit, so that the kids grow up more emotionally balanced and more emotionally healthy, because we want to give parents the tools to be able to teach their kids. So you're very welcome. I absolutely love this part of my work. I feel like it's part of my calling, and I'm very excited to work more in the research and development, as well as work more in transgenerational trauma. next month I may do a webinar a little bit more geared towards that, because the work that I have found in transgenerational trauma has been absolutely like mind-blowing. So yes, so none of us are crazy, okay, or maybe all of us are crazy, I don't know, whichever way you go, but yeah, so we have stigma in this culture about crazy, right? So when I say crazy, it's almost like a fond, crazy, right? Because I think the human condition is crazy making at times, and so we're all humans. Like, again, like I was on both sides of the coin, right? I was like really shut down, and then I was super non-self-regulating. And so I think if we are honest with ourselves, I mean, this is different from clinical pathology, right? There is a clinical pathology to quote unquote crazy, but if we are really honest with ourselves and we take the judgment out and we suspend judgment for a moment and we observe, we can see ourselves in all of this. We can see where we have been shut down before and afraid of being vulnerable. And we can see where we've been way over the top and super emotional and victimized and all the things, right? And so if we're really honest with ourselves, we can be present, right? And so this is not a space of judgment. In fact, we want to suspend judgment, and instead look from a space of observation and self-awareness, because it's about building emotional intelligence. And the more emotionally intelligent that you are, the more powerful you are. I didn't mention this, but based off of my genetic history, I had some schizophrenic networks in my brain. So when I went through EEGs, my brain, not to mention the fact that all the abuse in the developmental years really damaged my brain and my neural pathways. And so it's literally a miracle that I'm here. However, my prefrontal cortex was completely shut down, and I couldn't make, just general thought, the decision making. Like, it was all very reactive. And so sometimes it's not our fault per se. Sometimes it's because, and that's why I'm really moving into neurofeedback and neurostem, because if parts of our brain are not firing and not working efficiently, then we will be very reactive or shut down. And so a lot of times it's not necessarily our fault as much as it's our brain development. And trauma, even physical trauma, like like I said, I was in a lot of car accidents, and so that definitely concussions created issues with my brain. Yes, I do accept offline questions. If you want to shoot me an email, you can do so. I will send our general email for our practice. Perfect. And then again, you'll get an email, a 10 email series along with the replay. So you'll be able to, have access to the email there too. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, insights? I will definitely send everybody the replay, and then you'll get the webinar, yeah, go ahead, Angela. Your hand raised is Angela. Do you want to unmute? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I unmuted you if you, or I requested you could unmute. Do you want to ask a question? Go right ahead. Or you can also put it in the chat box too. Okay, yeah, do you want to put it in the chat box? Yeah, I'm not sure why it wouldn't work. Yeah, because I clicked on the Oh, I see. Let's see. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I don't know why it's yeah, there should be a little button when I asked to unmute pop up, or I don't know if you connected to the audio when you set up. Yeah, I'm not sure, but you're more than welcome to send me an email afterwards, and then also you'll get the email, you'll get the replay and all that kind of stuff. So I apologize. I don't quite know what to do. So awesome. If there's not any other questions, anybody have anything else? Lena, Keith, anyone else? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will end our meeting for this evening. Thank you guys so much for taking your time out to spend with me this evening and learn more about your mental health. It really shows me that you are conscious and aware and present and doing all of the work that is definitely needed. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Keith, would you like to say something? Can unmute. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure why oh, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Well, great live. I wanted to know several. One thing is, if a person wanted to find out more information, or when is going to be your next date you do another live?
Yeah, so I'll do one. I do one once a month. And so I don't have a date yet, but next month's topic is about PTSD and trauma. So we'll talk more about trauma and how trauma impacts the mind and the body and all the things. And so if our Facebook will have it, our email will have it. We try to promote it.
And how do I find out? Because I was looking for someone like you, but I'm in Hampton, Virginia. How do I find out someone around the area that I can go to this similar to what you do?
There is none, my love. I mean, people ask me all the time, the reason that I do the work that I do is because the life that I've had. And so there's only one Dr. Erica Steele, and I say that with all due love, respect, and humility. I will say this, that I am building a school here in Virginia to train people, because there are not enough people trained. Because people will be trained, let's say, on naturopathy, but they're not trained in mind body medicine, or they're mental health professionals, but they're not trained on the physical impact of the body, or they're trained on psychology, but they're not taught practically how to help people. Part of what I do is stuff that I've learned in school, but a lot of it is what I've learned from literally the school of the hard knocks. I've learned it because going to therapy and being re-traumatized, or watching my mother take pill after pill after pill, and I could literally time how long it would take for the combination would just stop working, right? And so everything has really influenced me. So this is actually my body of work. So it's not really something that I could say, oh, go to this person or go to that person, at least not yet. I do telehealth, and I do work internationally.
So you are doing telehealth? Okay, how does someone contact you? So say if I wanted to contact you,
Yeah.
find out more information.
So my practice is holistic family practice. And I'm in Virginia, and Virginia Beach, Virginia. That's where my brick and mortar is. And then in the email series that you get, you'll also get information if you want to book a consultation, all that kind of stuff. So you'll be able to have access to that. Yeah, I have a website. You can book online through our website. You can call our office at 757-685-4325. Those are typically the best. You could also text that number too. And so those are good places that you
Will
can.
that be and that all that information will be in the email
Mhm,
when you guys
totally.
okay, I will be following up with you. I enjoyed it today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. And then, yeah, Lena, where I'm in Virginia Beach, Virginia. So,
That's nowhere. I can be there.
yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Yeah. Hampton is like a hop, skip, and a jump. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you were farther, but now knowing that you're so close, this is so easy. I would love to talk to you.
Yeah.
And also, well, I'll follow up with you and go from there.
Okay.
So
Cool. That sounds
sounds
good.
great.
Yes,
All
indeed.
right.
For sure.
Thank
Yeah.
you so
Thank you
much.
for attending. For sure. Yeah. I'm originally from Southern California. So I'm a long way from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from New York, so I'm a little ways from from home
Yeah.
too. So that's perfect. That's
Yes,
perfect. Well,
exactly.
sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yes. Likewise. Thank you for attending. Yes. Wonderful. Let's see. Any other questions before we sign off?
I'm good.
Okay, sounds good. All right, wonderful. All right, everyone. Well, if you have any additional questions for me privately, feel free to just shoot me an email back. And thank you guys so much for attending. And I hope you have an amazing, amazing evening. Take care.